Where'd the coffee come from? Here it is. Oh, this one just looks.
How are you doing? Good to see you.
Hello, everyone. Bill Hammack.
Hey, Bill. How's Washington?
Well, I've been here about 46 minutes, so I'll let you know tomorrow. The weather's beautiful, and the view outside my window is of the White House. That's pretty cool.
Oh, wow, you got to brag about that.
We got that garbage out of the utility back coming up, so. Oh, I'm sorry, yeah, I was letting some of the stuff.
Like another cup of coffee.
I'm fine, thank you.
Seems like Bill is hearing us just fine.
I'm doing great. How you doing? Pick everything up. Right.
Yeah. Okay, if I could call the meeting to order. At this point, the following members are here with us. Karen Raymond, Bill Abramson, Elisa Speranza, Chuck Morse, and Paul Flower. And Bill Hammack is on the video call. Absent is Casey Tingle. Okay, so each of you has the agenda in front of you. If I could have an approval of the agenda. Move to approve. Moved.
Second.
Seconded, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye, the agenda's approved. The meeting minutes are attached in your packet. They were sent out several days ago. I hope everybody's had a chance to read them. If there are no corrections or additions, are there? And I'd entertain a motion to approve.
I'm a motion to approve the minutes.
Moved by Mr. Morris, seconded by Mr. Abramson. All in favor? Aye. The minutes are approved. In addition, in your packet and also sent out to you a couple days ago was our third quarter 2023 quarterly report from the Infrastructure Advisory Board that goes to the mayor of the city, the city council, the governor by executive order. And we also send it to the local delegation, have started to send it to the local senators and representatives in our legislature. Are there any comments, corrections, or additions to the quarterly report? If not, I'd entertain a motion to approve the quarterly report.
So moved.
Moved by Ms. Seconded. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? No. Okay. So that takes care of those items. We move on to item 6, the presentations, and the first presentation on our agenda is by the City of New Orleans on the Infrastructure Advisory Board update.
All right, thank you very much.
Okay.
So I'm Eric Smith. I'm from the CAO's office with the City of New Orleans. Thank you all for having me today. This should be pretty much standard overview, nothing crazy this quarter. So if we can move to the next slide here, get to the financials, revenue and allocations through November 1st. So the important thing to note, is that the collections have been pretty consistent. We've seen them more or less hang with the inflation rate based against the consumer price index throughout 2023. So we're basically expecting for collections to be fairly close to what they were last year overall. Again, adjusted for inflation, we're doing pretty good. However, you'll see down at the bottom there, what we have is a comparison of 2022 as of November 1st to 2023 as of November 1st. Small differences there. Some of that is just due to accounting corrections that we dealt with in 2022. And then you'll see the 2022 full, and then our estimate for the full year for 2023. We do expect collections to found for 2024. So our estimated sewage and water board portion, we're looking at probably around 17 million to 1,000. As well, the DPW to increase slightly, their share along the same lines.
You finish on this page. Second up, I have an observation about that. So when we passed fair share agreement, as Bill Hammack will remember, there were two other components of the fair share agreement on taxes that aren't being accounted for here, and there's reasons for that. So one is that there was an expected $2.5 million per year from the downtown development district to be used for infrastructure. The way that has worked out is all of that is going to DPW and is being used for street works. And I believe you have an update on that. So that's not accounted for in this list. Other thing that's not accounted for, or shown, I should say here, is part of the fair share was the merger of the New Orleans Tourism and Marketing Corporation, or part of it, with New Orleans and Company. So that there's a tax, an occupancy tax that funded that entity. Part of that entity was merged in New Orleans and Company, so all those expenses were taken away. And the projection was that there would be a $5 million per year savings. What we found is that the tax that funds that would not be redirected to infrastructure without tax. So between Mr. Montano, this guy, and Joe Giarrusso, the budget chair of the council agreed to give the Sewage and Water Board $5 million from the general fund in lieu of that, and then it would be in perpetuity. I believe there is a ordinance or that's voted on pretty soon that will make sure that that's in perpetuity. But the Sewage and Water Board's already got $5 million for 2023, and you're expected to be able to bill for another $5 million in January for 2024. So all I'm trying to say is, in terms of fair share money, when we think about it, there's another $2.5 million that DPW gets and another $5 million that Sewage and Water Board gets that is not shown.
No, that's, thank you. And then kind of on that note, we expect Notified Sewage and Water Board to go ahead and send the city for the $5 million. So we expect that to go over in January. So that will increase our estimated overall revenue there to about 22 million. With that included.
Question for you.
Yes.
Are there any implications from the recent budget, the passage of the recent budget for 2024 that may have implications on this committee?
Nothing that, no, there haven't been any changes in terms of allocations from Fund 5140, which is IMF, so.
Mr. Chairman, Eric, could that be included on a going forward basis, those additional funds on this particular slide?
I'll make sure that the additional annual contribution to Sewage and Water Board is there. I mean, I can put in the 2.5 million. As he said, it's more of an estimate. This kind of comes back around from the not CF or New Orleans Tourism and Cultural Fund. But I can include what we're seeing there.
I think that'd be helpful, and even just a footnote to, so that future members of this board, we don't have to remind everybody every time, so. It'd be great. Thank you, Eric.
One other thing I might say, well, 2024 in the hospitality industry, and maybe Bill Hammock's better to say this than me, but the hospitality is expecting about the same thing in 24 as 23.
I
However,
thi- Yeah.
However,
Paul, go ahead.
I'm just saying, but everybody that I know thinks 25 will be a better year for hospitality and therefore it should grow in 25. Go ahead, Bill.
Yeah, no, I was just going to emphasize what you were saying, Paul. To be honest with you, this year has been a little bit of a disappointment for the hospitality business. We had a good year last year. This year has been much softer. But according to projections by New Orleans and Company for 24, we're going to have similar, maybe a little bit up over what we had this year, but 2025, 2026 are looking strong. So as we think about cash flow planning, I think we could be comfortable in saying that revenues won't decrease. I don't think we'll have much increase next year, but in the 2 years after that, I do think we'll see revenue increases. And I also want to just reemphasize that we have a commitment from the administration, a commitment from the city council, that the $5 million that were not able to be included because of the limitations on how those tax dollars could be spent will be, and has been, at least initially, replaced by a permanent source of income from the general fund of the budget. So that's really important, because we plan going out, we always thought that there would be a revenue stream in the neighborhood of $25 million increasing each year based on growth in tourism. And we want to make sure that everyone recognizes that the fair share is in fact doing exactly what it anticipated doing.
Thank you. And in fact, we talked before about that $25 million target. If we're looking at overall collections for fair share, especially if we're including 5 million that is coming by a good deal, actually. So on to the next slide, which actually just covers exactly what we've already been discussing, which is that we do have the ordinance that's going forward that'll make that $5 billion a permanent part of the annual general budget. So again, it's something that this board can rely on being there. And then, so moving forward, we're just kind of a general overview of some of the capital outlay that we're seeing. I think probably the biggest update is just the 24-25 request to the state in terms of bond funding there. And again, I think Sewage and Water Board will be able to better discuss this in detail. Kind of in the same vein with capital outlay projects that are or Ninth Ward or Sankofa water project is under construction right now. We have the intention of resubmitting that $3.25 million request to the state in bond funding to get that finished. And then update, obviously we are still working on stabilizing the VA property and then kind of moving forward to see what the city will be able to. Other major bond and capital outlay requests.
I have a question. Ghassan, this $159 million, all of those funds are for the power plant in addition to what we've already received?
Of the circumstance.
So you're going to get into detail on that in your report. Oh,
Yeah, happy to touch on that later. Yep.
all right.
Can I ask, what does the VA rehab have to do with the rest of this?
It is not directly, it's one of the large, bond and capital outlay projects that,
Oh, okay.
that ended up being included in this, just to kind of give you an idea of the largest components that we're asking for state bond.
Oh, okay. I thought I missed, I thought I might have missed something.
Is the one that's directly related, but it also isn't a direct IMF, request.
Right.
So.
The lower Ninth Ward Green Infrastructure Project, she says resubmitted. Was it supposed to have been completed earlier or?
So a lot of times with bond funding, just when we ask for it, we don't get approval, so we're expecting to ask again. We have the sponsors, ready to line up and, bond funding. 24.
This is bond funding that it's being by the city, right? This is not state. I
So-
mean, this is just getting approval to sell the bonds, or do I have that wrong?
Yes.
Yeah.
So moving forward to the next, which is what's, actually particularly germane here. So, DPW's, usage of their portion of IMF funding. So we've been looking at throughout the course of the year, kind of where, that's going. We've talked about the majority of that really going towards hiring, additional permanent personnel to deal with, drainage, street issues. Directly related to, water management, more or less. So for 2023, at 41 positions that had been approved by the city council, we've got half of those hired, and the other half, we are in process on hiring. So the hope is that, come January or the end of January, we should have all of those positions filled. In addition, because some of those positions are gonna be new jobs, one of the holdups there is that we have 7 job studies. So basically, when we have a new position with the city, civil service has to essentially write a new, outline of what that position is. So there's a little bit of a time delay there.
How long does that take?
So that's a great question. It really depends. The job studies can take generally 4 to 6 weeks. Sometimes they can go much longer, just depends on kind of what the level of the job is, for one thing. So some of these positions, I'm not directly involved in hiring here, so I can't speak specifically, but some of these positions I understand are a little lower level, so those job studies will complete. And once those are done, they still have to be approved by Civil Service Commission. It's government, it's a process. And then a lot of these new laborers are in our traffic signal maintenance shop. So if we can move on to the next slide, we talk about actual projects that we've been funding with the overall IMF dollars that have been appropriated to DPW. So obviously the largest component here has been direct to Sewerage and Water Board. The rest of it primarily has been going to right-of-way repairs that we have here kind of allocated out to each council district. And then an additional $1.4 million of that IMF funding is going to improve. We can move on to the next slide. And then update on the DDD drainage improvement. I know this is a project that we have been talking about for a good long time now. And, we have work that's actually been started. So the work, has been completed. We had to change the scope of work a little bit just over time, just due to changes in cost estimates. Since this project was initially kind of created pre-COVID, a lot of the city's costs in terms of construction have risen substantially. So at the end, we have we're not able to get to as many blocks as we originally hoped. So we are at the point where we are expecting 90% of plans for those 18 blocks to be completed by the end of this year. And for the entire planning process for the DDD blocks to be completed roughly around Mardi Gras. We expect construction to begin directly after Mardi Gras. And we expect that the construction for the drainage improvements for these 18 blocks to be completed before. So basically by the end of June. There are any questions there? Moving on, next slide. One of the, I just kind of explained one of the hiccups that we've seen that have kind of affected the budget for this project and how much we're actually able to get accomplished have been utility conflicts. As some engineering drawings are going to show what we're talking about, but one of the largest issues that we've seen are just existing drainage lines that we did parking areas. And if you know what one of the major things that we're doing with this project is the parking lanes along those blocks are going to basically be used for water storage, permeable paving, and then more or less, I think that would be the correct way to describe it. And then, so that's there. We can move on to the last bit, which is the drainage consolidation working group. I don't really have any major updates here. I think probably that the members of this board probably have pretty much the same knowledge of what we've been finishing with this. We haven't made, I don't think, any major changes since the last meeting, as far as we've been aware.
I don't think we have met since our last AB meeting,
that's
so
what-
Sorry,
we have not
Yeah.
met the board that.
have not met since the last meeting.
And with that, if there are any questions I can answer.
I have one quick question. Could you back up to the slide where you were showing the allocations for certain projects in the various council districts?
Yes, sir.
I'm just absolutely amazed here that I don't see anything in Oliver Thomas's district. I mean, District E is not included.
So I can't, as far as I know, no, this is the information that was provided directly from Joe Threat and DPW on the current status of the allocations here.
I strongly recommend you don't show it to Oliver.
I would agree. Thank you.
Okay,
Question for you about the DDD project.
Sure.
And it says 18 blocks here, and you said that we had to reduce the blocks. How many blocks were reduced?
I don't have the information. I believe initially it was 24. Is that correct, Hassan?
Mhm.
So we reduced it basically by 4.
All right. I was at their meeting last week, their board meeting last week, and we're talking about, we're talking about some inclusion and equity in contracting for that particular job, because that's a perfect opportunity to make sure it's very inclusive.
Oh, absolutely. Questions that I can answer. Thank you all very much.
okay, thank you. Appreciate it very much. Next is item 6C, I guess it is, the infrastructure update from the Sewage and Water Board.
Thank you, Paul. Good afternoon, everybody. And I'd like to start by a welcome and an apology. A welcome to our water plant, and we've been really planning this for a while. So very excited and elated that you're all here and we get to see parts of the power complex at the conclusion of the meeting. And I'm very sorry that Bill Hammack couldn't be here, but we'll make sure that you get your own personal tour, Bill, at one point. The apologies has to do with the lack of heat.
Well, it's gotten better since I got here, so.
Well, the more I speak, the warmer it's gonna get. Well, given the fact that we're here, I thought we'd take advantage of having more staff available and attending. So many will share the actual updates. So me less talking and more them being the subject matter experts. They're going to answer all the questions and speak, from firsthand experience what they've been doing. So I think it's an awesome, unique opportunity today. So with that, we're going to start with Grace Birch, our Director of Communication, and talk about some exciting initiatives she's working on. Okay.
I echo Ghassan's sentiments. Welcome, everyone. It's so exciting to have everyone here at the plant. Also exciting, tomorrow we're going to debut a beta version of our pumping and power dashboard. You all might remember that we had a saltwater intrusion dashboard that was really successful. After the rain event on December 2nd, we feel ready to, at least in beta form, debut something that Steve Nelson has been championing. It's been a Herculean effort on our IT sides team and the engineering department to finally put in public form which pumping stations are operational during a high rain or anytime event. So the public can empower themselves to see where they live in the city and which pumping station they serve might be on or off. Just like the saltwater dashboard, this will be a living and a growing dashboard. It will be married with NOLA-ready information, weather information, and eventually you will see tomorrow, you can click on the drainage pumping stations on the left and see which pumps we have in each stations, which are 25 hertz, which are 60 hertz. Tomorrow's version will not show the individual pumps that are on, but again, we'll be working toward that and then getting feedback from our community on how we can make this better. We've certainly heard the message that we cannot communicate enough how aged our system is. And so we're taking that to heart and just, again, putting that information in the public's hands in the spirit of transparency, which is one of our North Stars here. Next slide will again show just a new way that we're communicating how we are set just on a day-to-day basis, and especially going into storms with our power status. The pumps are one issue, but if we don't have power to run those pumps, then that's another issue altogether. So we've made it really clear for folks. This would be our status today, 28 megawatts without either turbine. By tomorrow, we are also hopefully going to announce that T5 will be online. It's in testing right now. We had promised the public by December 15th, and tomorrow hopefully will be good news for that. So just another way that we can visually communicate to our customers sort of the flood risk that the city might have. We know that even with both turbines working, they could go off at any minute. So the green shouldn't put anyone, I suppose, at too much ease, but at least the public would get a sense of what our power capacity is going into weather events. We had a great meeting today with NOLA-ready, after talking with them extensively throughout the weeks to how we can just better communicate with our partners internally, and again, give everyone also internally that visual cue of where we're at with our pumping and power status. And with that, Steve, if I missed anything, please.
A question?
Sure.
Yeah. You say you're in beta testing to the dashboard. When do you expect it to go online, or do you know?
We're going to put the beta version online tomorrow.
Oh, okay.
We might live to regret that, but we're gonna let the public kind of see where we're at now and get feedback from them. Again, for us, probably the biggest question that will come up are what are those individual pumps that are on and offline, and we're gonna work toward that, but we didn't want to hold up this great progress, to don't let perfect get in the way of good, or did I switch that around? Anyway, yeah, just want to get out the door.
Could I make a comment? First of all, this is great stuff. This is exactly the kind of thing that I think will go a long way to provide the transparency to build confidence in what you guys are doing. Could you go back to the slide, the beta slide on the pumping? I tried to blow this up on my computer, but down on the lower left hand, there's comments about turbidity. And I don't think, am I saying that right? Is that what that says?
Bill. So this is, you'll see prototype 0.3. We are on prototype 4 at the moment. So that will not be on the the new one moving forward.
Yeah,
But you-
my comment was, I don't think anybody who would be looking this as a layperson would understand what that meant.
Tributary.
There'll be many disclaimers. and
Tributary,
explanations.
okay, I couldn't see what.
Even so, though, it does bring up the
Well-
point, tributary could be a little confusing too.
Yeah.
It might be basin or something more
No, and
colloquial.
that's perfect feedback. You know, when we first launched our saltwater dashboards, we got flooded with questions, and from that was born an excellent FAQ list. So we expect kind of that same thing to happen. You know, any changes we can make on the actual dashboard, we'll make, but also any questions that we can answer will live on that page as FAQs. And that's only a screenshot, Bill. So when you do blow it up on that screen, you won't be able to see anything, but the user will be able to blow it up and, you know, see exactly where their street is and whatnot. It's a GIS map powered by Esri. So there's a lot of detail in that map.
I like it. I like
Thank
it. Good for you.
That's good.
Yeah, Bill, I was gonna say that if they didn't change it, the engineers in the room could tell you what it is.
That's my biggest concern, Paul.
Good feedback, good feedback.
On a communication standpoint, and I don't know if it's Sewage and Water Board, it may be the city, and it may be something that just needs to be done, but I get all the alerts, so I get NOLA ready, and I don't know if I get Sewage and Water Board, but every time there seems to be some weather event, email, phone, which is great, except it kind of reminds me back in the day when we get all the hurricane alerts and it's like evacuate, 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 and nothing would happen. And then a big hurricane comes and some people are like, it's like crying wolf and they don't leave.
Yes.
And so I don't know what the decision make, and of course you can't predict the weather, knowing really when it's going to flood and when it's going to not, but I have a feeling that people are getting into the crying wolf scenario sometimes, and they don't react all the time when they get the notice because in many instances, nothing happens. And I don't know if they're, but we want people to take precautions when they get the notice, and particularly if something bad happens. And so I don't know if that's ever come up, if there's a way to deal with it. There may not be a way to deal with it, but I just mention it because I know just it has happened before with hurricanes, and I get the sense from when I talk to people that, oh, I got another notice, and then they're not taking it seriously because in many instances, nothing happens. And
So we sure had that same exact conversation, and given the fragility of the system today, I think it calls for over communicating. And at the end of the day, if we say to people, park on the neutral ground and nothing happens, it's no harm, no foul. But we are concerned about people start being complacent and not listening to. So we're going to continue to monitor, and obviously, you know, it's a balancing act. But given the December 2nd, we feel very, very much strongly about increasing our communication level for now. And again, it's like the pendulum. It will correct itself at one point. So.
Yeah, I was gonna add, the part of the discussion with NOSEP this morning is trying to quantify that risk. Because as you mentioned, it can be kind of soft, right? We're sort of trying to feel what the response will be. But I think we do have quantifiable metrics in terms of pumps, power, and then rain level threat. And we're working on a system right now that will help us quantify that so that we can put out consistent messaging so that we don't get into exactly that scenario that you're talking about.
Follow that up. We are only communicating to NOLA Ready and the public sort of the risk, and it's not on us to lift parking restrictions. That will
Right.
remain with NOLA
Correct.
Ready. And they do understand, I think, that nuance, and they don't want to call them needlessly.
But
But
they
I think-
understand, they need to understand the risk with our system so they can make more informed decisions. So it's a team effort, and it's an ongoing two-way conversation. So.
Just a quick question, since it's the holiday season and many of us end up at holiday parties explaining things to people. What's the most helpful thing that we can say for people to do in response to this? Will the responses go to you, or will they go somewhere else? If you're looking for actual input and not just, you know,
Sure.
complaining.
There will be an email, it's outreach@swbno.org that will be at the bottom of the page. Certainly, you're more than welcome to share publicly my email or Steve's.
Outreach is.
Yeah.
I'll try to
so,
use
yeah,
outreach.
Yeah, no problem. And I think that That is the number one question that we get from the public. Are the pumps on? And just to let people know, like, there's finally a place to go and see for yourself if the pumps are on or not. It's something. That's all. for me.
Awesome. Next, I think Steve is.
I think.
Oh, no, I'm sorry,
Yes, some
Caitlin.
updates.
Yeah. All right. Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Caitlin Timrak. I am our Power Complex Program Lead. And I'm going to talk a little bit about our current power situation to expand on this and go over the Power Complex as well. So as Grace mentioned, we are in the final stages of bringing Turbine 5 back online. Our internal crews have been working really diligently, nearly 7 days a week on this, and they've done a fantastic job. So we should be bringing that unit online tomorrow. In any scenario, we'll be letting everybody know where we're at, and hopefully we'll be able to move up that chart a little bit. We'll be sharing that news with everyone. In the meantime, as we have been and will continue to do in the future, we do have frequency changers throughout our system, in addition to several EMDs, which are 25 hertz generators at our facility here at the Carrollton Water Plant. So frequency changers are at a couple different locations across the city. They take power from Entergy or Turbine 6 should we need it, and they convert that to 25 hertz. So that's what we've been relying on a daily basis for our pumping at the moment. One of the questions that does come up is, can you just go buy more generators? And we have actually asked this question and asked partners and suppliers, and they more or less confirmed that there are no 25 hertz generators available on the market, at least in this country, possibly hemisphere. And so if we did, it would have to be custom fabricated and designed.
Generators that were bought after the.
That's what I'm referring to. Yeah, that's when we say EMDs, that's what we're referring to. There's 5 units. They're installed in the back of our plant, 3 of which are operational at this moment.
Oh, they are operational.
Yeah.
Okay.
Three of 5. Yeah.
Sorry.
3 of the 5 are,
Wow.
yes, correct. 2 are out of service. But we have been using them, and we used them last weekend. And again,
And they are 25.
they are,
Okay.
yes. So yes, we have a photo here of work on Turbine 5, just an example to kind of let folks know what we're looking at. So we'll move on to the next slide. Ultimately, we recognize that this is just not where we want to be in general, and that's why we made that decision several years ago to move forward with this large investment in the power complex. So as a reminder, what this will do is allow us to tie directly into a substation that is built on our property. And if anybody's available to take the tour, you'll be able to see that today. That will provide our power for a daily basis as well as for rain events. Again, utilizing frequency converters to take that 60 hertz power from Entergy and convert it to 25 hertz for our pumps. So very similar to what we're doing now, but new equipment, more reliable, more modern. In the unlikely, yet it has happened event that Entergy is not available, then we do have Turbine 6 and the new Turbine 7, which we're purchasing, which will be the backup to that. So the substation is tied in directly to the transmission line that runs right along the side of the property, and so that's a huge benefit for us.
Can I ask a question about that? Turbine 6 and 7, once they get up and can they run the whole system
Together, they're
together?
about 40 megawatts. So
And the whole system's about 40.
the whole system, what we say is our peak demand on 25 hertz is about 44 megawatts. So it's a little bit short, but we have the frequency changer, the other frequency changers in this system. So, and again, that 44 megawatts was a peak demand, I think, from 2019. And so that is an actual number, and that's kind of what we're using.
So 6 and 7 provide you with almost 100% redundancy, but you have other ways to
Correct.
even increase your redundancy.
Correct.
Yes.
That's right.
Okay, thanks.
No, it's a good question. So again, we'll be able to see more of this, but the photos here on the slide, the one on the top middle is the substation that Entergy is building and basically complete at this point. And the bottom slide's a little small, but is a photo of the utility rack, which is a very impressive structure. And it's a critical part that links the 2 sides of the facility electrically. We have major electrical distribution points on this side of the facility for those in this room, and they have to be connected to the other side. So that's the purpose of that. So right now the timeline on that is the summer of 2022 to have the frequency changers installed and be able to take advantage of. 25, did I say? I don't know what I said.
22, that's-
Oh, definitely not 22. I'm so sorry. That was what we wanted it to be, but here we are.
So let me just ask a question. That's not the whole system though, right? I mean, the 29 million that we aren't gonna get, hopefully we'll get towards the third quarter of next year. That part of it won't be connected. I'm trying to understand, will the whole system be connected to the substation by summer of 2025, or will some pieces of it be later?
Yeah, and no one better than Caitlin can explain what the 29 will go towards and maybe take advantage of the fact and speak about the 5 million and how was
Sure.
already embedded in the budget, and we're counting on that.
Yeah, yeah. So from a looking at the capital outlay standpoint, there was the number of 159 million earlier. That number actually includes 55 million that's already been allocated to this program, to this project from FP&C. The 29 million is presently in P5, and so
So that's part of the 55.
no, that's in addition to the 55.
That is
So the
in-
55 has already been allocated to us. There's the additional 25 that is in 29 that's in P5, and we need to move to P1 next year. And the balance of that 158 is an additional, I would say it's an ambitious, but it's an additional 75 that we added, that is a request to add into P5. So that is not yet part of what's on the books at the state level.
Okay, so because you've got a couple of us up in Baton Rouge
Yeah.
saying things, so we want to make
Yeah.
sure.
Absolutely. And I'm happy to provide some more
So,
information.
so
but-
the, if I can, the 29 million
Mm.
is in addition to the 59 that we've already gotten.
Correct.
All of that goes to phase one. The 29 will go to phase one of the power complex.
Well, the 29 at this point is actually going towards phase 2. And so to answer your,
Phase 1B.
yeah, we can, so that's,
I see it.
that's correct. That's correct. I
I need to show you what you all have told us phase one and
Yes.
phase two.
So,
So-
and we
That's-
will
that's fair.
give you information
Yeah.
that reflects everything we're sharing with you.
yes.
Okay.
Yeah,
good,
we have
because
additional-
You've got phase one on literature that, stuff that you've given us that says phase one is around 250 something,
Right.
if I'm not mistaken. And then you've got another 150 in phase two. What you're saying is this 29 is part of the 250 that you had in that
Well,
document.
I want to make sure, my point is of 1A and 1B is that it's one project, and the 29 will complete that project. There are multiple other phases that would be subsequent
Follow
to
that,
that, following
yes.
that, like
Yeah.
TA, Turbine 8 and such. But the 29, to me, are an integral part of completing the initial phase of the power complex.
But put another way, if I can say this and tell me if we're right. With that 29 million, the substation is now connected to everything.
So just to put an even finer point on it, so there are 3 frequency changers that we have purchased and have paid for, essentially. The funding that we have available to us right now is to install 2 of those. So the 29 will allow us to install that 3rd frequency changer, as well as complete some other components such as construction of a new operation center, a new building. So the frequency changers can come online, and we can use those and take advantage of the benefits of the substation prior to that, but it is not the complete solution.
Without the 29
Correct.
million, what do we have to provide the city in 2025? That's what Paul wants to know.
Sure. And so that's 2 frequency changers. And so that is
Substation, 2 frequency
Correct.
changers, D7.
correct.
Utility rack, and an old switch gear that connects it all. So it would allow us to utilize the new substation as a primary power to run all 25 hertz pumps in Old City. Basically,
That's right.
so we'll be in a good, solid place, but the 29 is gonna tie it all and complete.
Correct.
Because we purchased a 3rd frequency changer, spend $10 million on it. It's gonna sit there unconnected unless we have the money. We also have, the subsequent project is, which hopefully will continue to get funding for, is a new switch gear that creates a much more reliable way to disperse the power that now is reliable. So I know it's very complicated, but and we're piecemealing it because the money comes in piecemeal.
Right.
That was
And
gonna
I-
be my question. Would more money would more money sooner speed it up, or is there a limit on the capacity and,
No.
you know,
Answer is no,
Okay.
because again, the substation will be here, will
Right.
be ready. The installation of the frequency changers and finishing of the utility rack become the critical part, and then that will not be available till
it's only so fast?
early to mid 2025.
Okay.
Yep,
So-
throwing money at it will not get us that much improvement, and then that's money that will be taken away from the
Other
other parts.
things, right. Got it. Okay, thank you.
Then-
That's,
Can I ask a question, please, Ghassan?
course.
Obviously, I feel confident that Paul Flower is going to be able to get you the 29 million.
David
The-
Gallo.
Both of them. But the 75 million after that, and the way I understand it is 29 million gets the power complex complete and able to use the all three frequency converters, be able to run the system. What is the additional 75 million you just mentioned for?
Yep. So kind of, again, talking to the variety of components and phases to this. I'm pulling out my spreadsheet here. So ideally, we would like to have an additional turbine called Turbine 8, and that would provide just an additional level of redundancy, right? So speaking to getting to that above 45 megawatts. There are some additional other components in the system that we would like to bring some additional redundancy and resiliency. So we have, just to get very technical, we have 3 other locations on our facility where we take a drop from Entergy. We would love to disconnect from those, connect those more to the substation. And so we have these multiple connection points and just fully redundant on the substation. A couple of other resiliency areas. We are including a connection to the fuel tanks as part of this, but again, Ghassan mentioned switchgear, and then I already mentioned Turbine 8. So yeah.
I mean, switchgear cannot be under.
No, I'm sorry.
you know,
Yes,
I mean,
thank you.
That's
Yeah.
a very critical piece. So everything is going to be new, and it's going to rely on an older piece of equipment.
Yeah.
So, that's like a weak link. So we need to focus on getting rid of that. And
So the 29, the 29 million doesn't get you the new switchgear that you're talking about. You need
unless,
additional.
I mean, it would if we take money away from, let's say, the frequency changer, the third one. So that it's going to be a shell game of what we think is more priority. And
Right.
so.
Yeah.
We're in that mode.
What did T7 cost and what would T8 cost?
Yeah. So there's a couple different ways to answer that question depending on, but I would say the actual, just the purchase of that equipment, what we paid for it, just the manufacturing of the equipment alone was about $16 million. So 16 million. 16, yes.
I'm
Yeah.
hard of hearing.
No, all good. So yes.
Commissioning.
Right. And so there are additional components to all of that. And so the estimate that we use is 25 million. That includes the installation, commissioning. There's other items to that. We have to buy more cable in order to connect everything. So that's where there's an additional add on top of that.
It's
And
about 30
T8?
million. Really.
And that's the same estimate that we would use for a Turbine 8.
Okay, thank you.
So just as we can go to the next slide, unless there's any other questions, but we'll give a kind of a current update on the existing construction. So this is another photo of the utility rack, and this is one of those projects that is being funded by the capital outlay. So very thankful for that. Entergy's work, again, the substation, they should be complete with their commissioning by the end of January. It is actually energized now, so it is a live 230 kV connection right over there. They're using that in their system. They're going through testing and commissioning, and we'll wrap that up. On our side, the utility rack should be complete in Q1. And if you're able to go out there, we have a lot of other work going on related to constructing the foundations for all the equipment. So we can't forget that we need to have a place to put the equipment. We've already purchased it. It needs to go somewhere. So there's a lot of that work is going on right now. The equipment itself, the frequency changers and Turbine 7, Those are in various stages of manufacturing. They're nearly done. And I think in Turbine 7's case, actually completed and on its way, if not already in storage in Houston. So we're feeling really good about that equipment being ready. The last major contract for this work right now is the phase 1 commissioning contract, and that is on the street right now. We're very excited about that, and we'll be opening bids in January.
One more thing I want to just add, because even good things sometimes get criticized by somebody. So the substation is going to be delivered about a year early. But we were told at the time when Entergy was scheduling that if they didn't make that decision and schedule it and order the parts,
We
there
would
would
have
have
made
been
25.
would have been, yeah. So we would be waiting for the substation to start, or we would be working. So it's a great problem to have when you have a substation waiting for you to use. I mean, as you go out to your Christmas parties,
Yeah.
these one
We'll explain that.
great
The
message.
many.
We'll explain that in great detail.
Yeah.
Well, and if nothing else, in addition to that, from a construction standpoint, I mean, you'll go out there, you can see there is a ton of work going on over there. So if nothing else, that work is done and we're able to, create, a less congested work area over there. So
But it sounds like you've had good cooperation with Entergy.
we've had really great,
Yeah.
yeah, it's been
That
excellent.
alone is a success story,
Yes.
given the history of this
Yeah.
project.
Yeah.
I think it's
Yeah,
great.
their work has gone really well. So I just have one more slide on the power complex side of things, just sharing a photo of what Turbine 7 looks like. This is in at the factory acceptance test in San Diego. We did have some of our operations and maintenance teams were able to attend that so they could see it in person, send the test, see it live, meet the folks who built it, and also just really continue to get excited on the staff level about what's coming in the future. So it was a great opportunity. And with that, that's kind of where we're at with the power complex. More to come on that, of course, but for now, I think we'll turn it over to Steve. Yeah, of course.
In terms of the Christmas parties. If everybody hears right now about the pumps are down, the pumps are down, the pumps. If we were to tell someone in 2025, we're going to have a new substation at the main power plant, what is the rest of it? Which means that the pumps won't go offline anymore, or what is the rest of that we can
Yeah.
communicate?
The simplest way to describe the pumps will have a reliable source of power that is likely to be there when we need it. And if that source of power goes down, we're going to have a backup power that's equally modern and reliable. So it's it's exactly where we need to be for the next 50 years. So
That's right.
And just in terms of when the pumps go down, how much of it is power related, how much of it is mechanical?
So currently we have 95 of the 99 large drainage pumps working. Invariably, you'll have a handful down for maintenance, or they just break down and just have to repair them. So we have not had an issue with pumps not being there for us, with maybe the exception of DPS 12, which is a one pumping station. So if that pump goes down, there's no pumping, even though we have redundancy.
I get that, but
That's
just
what-
like the public hears pump went offline or pumps down. Is it power related or is it
Yes.
mechanical related? How do you
Power
know the
related,
difference?
invariably is power
It's
related.
invariably power related.
Yes.
So if I tell people, when you hear that the pumps are going down, that'll be fixed in 2025 when the substation is built. I mean, can some sort of nuanced way say that?
Yeah, you lose power to your house, your fridge is still working, but you don't have power to.
Because I don't think a lot of people understand when the pumps go down that it's power related, it's not mechanical. I think most people think it's mechanical.
I think the only thing is that if Christmas party, the audience has only had one. You might go on to explain to them that with the exception of pump 12, which is a one pump. Mechanically, that one
Which-
goes down.
And Pump 12 serves what area?
Like you.
Thoughts.
But it is supported,
Going to any Christmas party.
but it is supported by other pumping stations, so
Right.
that the canal, the flow goes somewhere
Somewhere.
else, and another basin is pumped.
If there's power. Right.
And the condition and age of the other pumps that are on, they're all ranges or mostly new, any that are at risk that continue to function but need to be updated.
Yeah, I mean, I think what we find, and, you know, Chris and Beck have been working on the pump side of things longer than I have, but, you know, we have old pumps in our system, but they do generally work really well, right? So occasionally they do need to be rehabbed. Some of them are 100 years old and they just require maintenance and some work every once in a while, but those, they generally serve us very well. So there's a wide variety of ages, so.
And no issues with parts availability and supply chain
that is-
concerns.
That's
or-
the biggest challenge is having to ship parts, you know, to specific.
Make
I mean,
parts.
Yeah, or make parts or machine them, yes, for sure. One thing we're gonna hopefully generate some more focus on is the other pumping stations outside the old city that rely on Entergy, which, you know, I mean, it's got some issues, but it's reliable. But if that goes down, the backup power that we have, which we have diesel generators, and in some instances, those generators are old and they're not very reliable. So we're gonna try to, at one point, bring that up in terms of priorities and start focusing on those. So
I guess we hope that one day we'll have alternative energy sources
Hmm.
to help keep these pumps, keep our city moving forward. So
part of the future.
Steve? Yeah, thank you. I hope everyone recognizes the juxtaposition between the last slide and this slide. We went from jet turbines to something I've heard described as a Roman bath, which you can see if you look out the window here. It's a beautiful architectural structure, very, very old, from the 1920s, but also, as we were talking about the 25 hertz pumps, very reliable if and when maintained. And IAB funding has been critical in helping us maintain those 28 different filter basins that are out there. Filters 11 through 28, that rehab project has been completed in 2023. We have an additional 5 filters that will be part of a construction package we'll advertise in early 24. And this is really going to help with our redundancy in terms of the amount of water we can filter so that we can maintain our different filter galleries. And if we have an issue with our other major set of filters, which is over by Claiborne, we have some ability to cordon those areas off. The next phase of work that's going to be completed at the Sycamore Filter Gallery, which is at SFG is there, is going to be part of a funding allocation through the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers. We got a couple of photos here to kind of show some of the things that have been replaced. We had valves throughout the filter galleries that were controlled by water, which is convenient because we got a lot of water there. But as things leak, it makes for some really unpleasant, if not totally unsafe working conditions. So our engineering group has put together a series of upgrades that have switched those to pneumatic valves. It makes it a lot easier to maintain. It's a lot safer to work on. You can see that in the next set of photos there in the next slides, the old tubing and the new piping that's there. We've also done a lot of work with structural steel. If you look at the next photo, there's 2 in here. This is an example of some steel pedestals that we've replaced. Really, really old steel that needed to get moved. The next photograph is a picture of the collection tubes. So these are called Dellery tubes. They're basically perforated copper pipes that lay along the bottom of the filter galleries. And then we stack anthracite, which is basically coal, and then sand, and then gravel on top of that. And that helps filter the water before it goes into our clear wells, which is then distributed into the city. And you can see clearly the old and new condition there. The next slide looks at, that's kind of an illustration of our filter media being removed, and then the final picture of it installed and in place. And then we have a last photograph that illustrates something that could have come off the Titanic, but was in fact in the basement. And I am really glad that I don't have to work under the steel shown in the picture to the left. So that's been a really important project for us. We're really thankful for the IAB funding there. Are there any questions about that project at this point?
Just a comment. First of all, I've been through that part of the plant in the past, and it was such a safety nightmare for the workers, let alone visitors.
Yeah.
And at that time, which is before anybody in this room was in charge of anything, that was my main concern. You know, I tried not to think about that our drinking water was coming through those pipes. And so how much of this upgrade do you feel, you know, confident is going to really dramatically increase worker safety on the site?
Well, I think the piece about the ability to even work in those areas, in
Yeah.
those really wet conditions, that's been addressed. I do, if you notice, there's a lot of you're absolutely right, non-compliant spaces. They're handrails being a
Right.
big issue. We actually have
Things hanging
some
down.
funding coming in to put in some handrails around those filter galleries. So that work is ongoing. As far as a percentage, I couldn't give you an exact percentage, but it's something that we're definitely going to be focused on, and is going to be a key component of the next slide that I've got here, which is a great transition into our water quality master plan, which is currently in progress. That CDM Smith is the apparent contractor, the consultant that will help us with that. And that's exactly part of what we're going to be looking at is life safety and worker safety, because if you've got a safe environment, it's easier for folks to show up to work. They feel more comfortable. We can be more productive, and that adds itself. That process, I have that towards end of the year. I think our January board meeting is actually when the final approval is going to be for that scope of work. That's a 1.5 to 24-month process, and it could not come any sooner. The regulations that we have coming up from PFOS, PFO, those forever chemicals that everybody has heard about, as well as the lead and copper rule revisions that they're gonna add some really serious operational parameters and considerations for us. And all of that coupled in with the saltwater intrusion that we've experienced this last year, all of those are going to be really important considerations for us to have CDM help us address and lay out a series of upgrades and operational parameters for us that'll help us to set the stage for the next 50 years with the plan.
So if I can put it in my language, so I'll make sure I understand it. What this is, a study by CDM Smith to say, to help you work through what needs to be done to modernize the water plant. Is that a fair way to put it?
Bring new technology to how we purify water, yes.
So, a couple of questions. How can you, if you can upgrade, when you look at upgrading the plant, can you deal with saltwater intrusion? Or is that something that the solution is, go up river to get fresh water? Or is that just something you've got to try and investigate?
That's one of the questions we've got to answer. And one of the big topics of conversation with CDM is what level of chloride concentration, how much salt is too much? And that then drives how much water do you have to either pump in or take from groundwater or put in from reverse osmosis? We got to answer those questions with this study.
A minor question, just because I don't understand it. How can copper be a problem for pipe, for water? Because we put copper for water all over.
Yeah.
How does it get contaminated? I guess a copper pipe. I can understand lead. I just don't know.
Good question.
Copper is not an issue for us in New Orleans, and for the vast majority of water systems, it's not really a concern. Where it becomes more of an issue is the solder in copper pipe. So not to get into too much detail, but with elevated chloride levels, the solder is a serious concern.
Yeah. Understand. Any questions about that?
The next slide goes to
Jonesy.
Jonesy on smart metering update.
Everyone, nice to see you all again. So I'm going to be talking about smart metering. So we are officially well underway in our intentional slow start. So right now, fresh off the press, as of this morning, we have 864 meters in the ground. 92% have a callback rate, which is a very high number for our slow start installation.
I'm sorry, what is the 92%?
That means 92% of those meters are actively getting hourly reads in our system.
Okay, the others are just you're trying to connect it, or there's a problem with it?
So they're connected, but that 8% reflects, it takes 3 days for us to say that it's an accurate connection, so we have to wait for 3 days of reads. And since this is of this morning, that includes some of those numbers. Contractually, the goal is to have it, I think that it's 99.2% required callback rate. So it's a pretty high number that's in our contract. We also have 325 smart meters that our internal folks have connected with a radio and are fully calling back. There's a larger number there. 2,200 meters are our new designed meters, but not all of them have the radio attached. That's what we're doing now. We're attaching the radio and connecting them into the system. The reason why we didn't have the radio yet is because we didn't put in the radio until the network was up. Now that the network is up, we're going back to those locations. We are currently installing all customer types up to 2-inch meters as part of the project. Within the next month, we're going to be starting to install our larger meter population, of which we have 800 roughly that we're going to be starting to install in about a month time. I do want to talk a little bit about what slow start means. And the reason that we're doing a slow start. So not only do you find any changes in processes and procedures that you need installing meters, best practices on how we deal with our infrastructure, what we're going to find in the ground. We've now found 2 meters from the 1940s, which also means piping and connections from the 1940s. So
Meters that were still connected and supposedly in use?
yes, they were in use.
Awesome.
Actively. So as you can imagine, that piping failed and we had to repair those situations. So we have all of those line items in our contract to do that work, so that every location we're touching, we're leaving in a better state than when we found it. But part of that process is also to take every step of the way through our integration process and all the way up to what our billing function will be. So we have 9 interfaces that we work with on the technology side to make sure that every system gets the same data in the same fashion. And so we're triple checking all of those integrations to make sure that we are getting exactly what we need. We're looking at the data to make sure it makes sense. And we're really looking at what the impact will be for our customers, not just from a large population, but from an individual customer. So like when we say a 1940s meter, right, that's extraordinarily old. The average life of these meters is 20 years. So we are well outside of the life. Our average population, the age for our small meters, so it's mostly residential, it's actually pretty low. It's about 7 years. It's pretty good. It's our average. But when you look at our 7 years for our small residential meters mostly, but for our large meters, our average age is 32. And so what that means is our old style meters, which is what was the standard and has been the standard until very recently, were mechanical meters. So in mechanical meters, over time, those parts slow down. And also over time, it takes more and more force or a higher flow to actually make it start moving. So not only do you have accuracy decline in the age of the meters, but you also start losing the capture of all of those low flow scenarios. So if you're just using a little bit of water, that meter might not even be moving. So what that means is as we're changing out this population, we're going to have more accurate meters. They're so accurate, you can hold it up and the wind can move it. So you're really getting every single drop captured. So as part of this process, we're evaluating exactly what that means and what that impacts are to our customers.
And you said there were 800 large meters in total in the system?
Yeah, so we have 800 large meters that are used for domestic water. We have about another 800 meters that are used for fire water cases. You have an intermediate size, which is our 1.5 and 2-inch meters. We have about 4,800 of those. Those are currently being changed out as we speak.
And of those, if you know, how many of those are the older mechanical meters?
Our entire population was
All of
mechanical
them.
meters, every single one.
The old meters where you found old piping. What's the criteria to replace the old piping? Is it because you couldn't connect the new meter, or is it because it was lead, or what's the criteria where you would actually replace old piping?
So in the meter box, when you look in the small meter box, The only thing in the small meter box, our Ford meter box, and I should have brought it upstairs, but it like weighs 60 pounds. You can't actually see the piping. You only see fittings. So in that scenario, the only thing that would trigger a replacement of that piping is if there was a leak, or you could see the register was moving in some form or fashion that didn't make sense. So we know something else is going on with the plumbing. And our larger meters are 1.5 and 2 inch. These are in manholes. So generally speaking, you can see a few inches on either side. If there's an active leak that you can see within that vault, they're going to go ahead and fix that leak. What happens though in the 1.5 and 2 inch population, we're changing from a threaded connection to a flanged connection. So we're actually having to remove the pipe to put on the correct connection. So that means we have to turn off the water. And one of the pieces in our plumbing components is that shutoff valve. That's our highest rate of failure. That valve will fail. It usually fails open, so that doesn't mean the customer is without water, but we can't isolate that valve to do the work to remove the meter. So when that fails, that's when we have to change the plumbing and the plumbing connections there.
So if leaking, you have to pipe. Which pipe are you fixing? From the meter to what?
So we can fix on both sides, on the utility side or on the customer side. We still own about 2 to 3 feet on either side, on the customer side of the meter. So we have in that to repair. We can also repair the utility side. It's a lot easier to repair the customer side because you're not in a pressurized main. The utility side is pressurized. And that's why you have that shutoff valve. It all remains pressurized. So it's a harder job to fix that plumbing.
But is it just to fix the leak? Or are you going in there and replacing the entire pipe to the customer's connection?
So we are not replacing the entire pipe.
You're just trying to make it not leak.
Correct.
Correct.
Less lead.
What if it's lead, we're gonna document it and as a separate initiative and much larger program, we're gonna have a lead service line replacement program that we're gonna launch toward the end of the year. So
But the only way you know whether it's lead or not is if you have a leak and you uncover it, because you can't tell from just replacing the meter.
So for our 1.5 inch and up, occasionally you can see the service line within the manhole and then you can identify it. Either visually through scratch tests, through magnetic tests. On our small customers, you basically have to pothole on the outside of the meter boxes to determine whether or not, or what that material is. So we are not doing that as part of this process because the cost was astronomical to do so.
but independently and separately, we're doing an inventory of all our service lines to determine which one is lead, which one is not, to decide the scale of the project and what we need to replace. Again, separate from the smart meter program.
There is specific prioritization of who gets the newer. Have you guys done that by area or how are you prioritizing the change?
Yeah, so we design it based on a meter reading route. The goal of the project is to work around our normal O&M because we want to make sure that that billing function continues. And so the way that we designed that is we made sure we had the appropriate stock. We made sure the infrastructure was in place. The antennas were up to be able to collect the reads. And then we looked at the pace of the installation. And then we actually had no demographic information at all in it, and matched up those parameters. And that's how we determined our schedule. So we have installed meters across all of the districts. We did look to make sure that it was a representative sample across the entire population, but the design of who gets what and when is completely, it's just a numbers game. There's no demographics.
Current question or point. So you're going by district or by O&M or your routes, but within that, are you doing the 2 inch first, then when you get all those done, going back and doing the 1 inch meters and the 5/8, or how's that working?
Sure. So for supply chain, we're able to actually start our 1.5 and 2 inch meter population early because we're able to get those meters earlier. Of course, as always happens in New Orleans, our 5/8 inch meters, the connection are what none of the rest of the country uses. So we had to wait a little bit longer to get those in. But we were able to start on the 1.5 and 2 inch. So because it's a quicker installation for the small meters, we're making up the rest of that route that we started with early on the 1.5 and 2. So how our routes are designed, it's anywhere from 5/8 inch meter up to 2 inch. And then our large meters, everything over that is in its own route. So because we only have 800, we released all of them to the installation crew for those large meters.
And I think to your point, just so we're clear, as time lapses, if you take a snapshot of all 5 districts across the city, we're gonna have almost equal percentages of work completed. So the same process we're applying across the cities. We're not just focusing on one.
Sure.
Yeah.
Finish one and move on. We're just doing it all the way across the city.
Did have to have one caveat to that because we have our pilot program in Algiers Point. And so to fix the data issues that come from those old style radios, which are now 17 years old and still operating, just fantastic use case for us. We are going to go replace those. So we're going to see a slightly higher representation there for a short time, but that will be made up in about 2 months.
Finish it? Okay. So couple of things. If all meters are not reading exactly right or accurately, I'm assuming they're under reading rather than over reading. A fair statement.
Yes, there's been no documentation ever of an overread.
Okay, so therefore, when you get these meters, and I think you mentioned the COA, you're liable to have, not on my house, of course, but on Neil's house. When he gets his automated smart meter, he's probably gonna get a higher usage reading because the meter would be. Not a fair statement. Okay, 2 questions that go along with that. I'm sorry, go ahead.
I mean, just anticipating, obviously, this is what we're experiencing, which is very consistent. It's a universal issue with each and every utility that's gone through this exercise. So what we're trying to do is create a bigger and bigger sample to decipher what that
What
that
it really
looks
is.
like and what adjustments we might need to do to soften that.
So you
Right.
might not actually bill off of your smart meters that are in until you get a large enough sample to figure out what you've got.
But that's the balancing act. The sooner we start using the smart meter, the better. Because then the longer we wait, that the larger that delta is gonna to grow and get, right? And then harder to manage. So either to write off or to absorb by our customers. So our goal is to hit, I guess, the ground running sometime in the end of January, maybe February, and start
Okay,
with some sort of billing based on the actual smart meters.
and you're gonna have to figure out how to communicate that.
Absolutely.
So, next question, if I think you said your ultimate goal is to build up to where you're averaging about 4,000 meters a month installed. Do you think you'll ramp up to that by the end of the first quarter of next year or?
Yeah, so we are on track to be at full speed right around mid-February, with the caveat being Mardi Gras, of course. But that is the goal, yes.
Okay, one final question, and this may be an unfair question, but constantly tell ourselves that we're losing X amount of produced water per day, 40 to 50,000 as it is gallons per day, I think, 1,000 or million, I forget.
Yeah.
Million, I'm sorry. So it's off by factor of 10, so. So 40 to 50 million gallons of water a day is that we're losing due to leaks, or in the process of trying to repair and or replace those pipes. And I guess we'll get to what are our chances of continuing that program. But my question is this about the meters. How are we calculating that lossage if it's off of what we're billing or the usage we see going through the meters? And in fact, that's a low reading, going to be a higher reading, and I don't know by how much. To maybe that 40 to 50 million gallons a day is a little bit of a high estimate of leakage, and it'll come down after you get a chance to really see this.
Excellent point. And we believe that once we have all the smart meters installed and we're capturing accurate consumption, we're gonna gain as a placeholder, 10% of that water that we currently we can account for it. So that number is gonna will shrink for sure.
So it's not that the leakage is shrinking, it's that you're accounting for more more of the water.
We're held responsible for maybe unfairly for 10 to 15% maybe of water that is going through the meters but not being registered, but counting as non-revenue. So that hopefully will, for a good, I mean, good outcome, that will be corrected.
Certainly, this is a super important program
good.
because it's gonna ultimately, maybe not at first, eliminate one of your biggest public relations issues.
Knock on wood.
In this building, so knock on wood.
Paul set up this question perfectly by using me as an example. I'm looking forward to getting my smart meter. However, I remember, wasn't there an ability for people to opt out of getting a smart meter and keeping their?
There's no ability to opt out in this program.
I remember Entergy had that.
They
program.
did.
Sewer and water bill did. So everybody's getting a smart meter whether you want it or not.
That's correct.
Keep the dumb meter. Great. It's very exciting.
Any other questions on this particular slide? Are we gonna,
We're moving
I'll
on. I
wait.
mean, moving on to the next topic.
are we gonna talk about the water programs at all? Never mind, just go ahead.
Yeah. I mean, the water,
The piping.
it's not part of our, not today.
All right, paving restoration, IAB agreed to fund additional efforts for our paving contractors back in July. And we have seen a significant increase in the amount of paving work that's being done on a monthly basis. So this graphic, I think, pretty clearly illustrates that tipping point there in July, August, where we've seen a reduction from over 3,000 work orders in July to right around 1,400 right now. I expect that to drop by another 100 to 300 by the end of the year. I know the goal had been 600 to 1,000, but we're going to be pretty close to that. And I think the really important piece is not 1,000. The goal is to get to 0, because what that will allow us to do is have that average response time go from 100 days between making a hole and filling it at the beginning of 2023 down to 2 to 4 weeks, which is getting in line with an industry standard. And I think we've all heard about the issues and complaints. We've all seen them as we've driven around, and I'm really pleased at the direction this is heading. This is part one of a 2-part issue. The second being our internal crews being able to keep up with that paving. And as of the last 4 or 5 months, they've been able to do between 60 and 100 cuts a week, which is keeping pace with the holes that we're making. So I'm really proud of our internal networks crews and very, very thankful for IAB's participation in what is clearly an effective effort in getting this backlog down to 0 in 2024.
Question for you.
Yes.
So you increase the contractors to do this work. Are these small contractors, smaller contracts, or are they larger contracts?
So we have 2 contractors involved, CMG and Wallace Drennan, and CMG has been doing the bulk of this work. They do use a couple of different subs, and I cannot recall exactly what their subs are, but I do want to call out Carmelo Gutierrez for doing a phenomenal job. They've been doing upwards of 100 cuts a month, which is really, really good production.
But really, you've got 2 contractors, and one that performs the best gets the most.
You hit the nail on the head.
Okay, any questions on this slide, or can we go to the next one? Or is there any?
All right, I'm gonna, Ray Lewis, just highlight on the financials, our slides that we normally share with the board are showing our top line revenue from the fund is up to 53.1 million through the end of October. And our total expenditures that we've paid out using the IMF funds at 17.5 million. So it's been very beneficial. Again, we've been working through our budget season for 24. So this fund is really helping us to plan for projects. So appreciate it again. We have allocated to contracts about 40.8 million, which are detailed out on the pro forma slide. And then this last quarter spent around about 900,000, primarily on these first 4, the Sycamore Filter Gallery, the T7 project, smart metering, and the power complex. So things are moving along nicely. As we mentioned earlier, the additional 5 million for 24 will be applied for in January. On the next slide, we have listed 5.
Just one quick question. Are you done with the SELA payments?
We
Not
pay
by a long shot, right? You can still get a
30
lot.
years.
Yeah, but is that good? So that's just gonna be recurring line item?
it's a historical payment that was
Right.
done, I guess, a couple of years ago.
Right.
But we've used our drainage funds to pay the
Okay,
annual.
so it's not coming out of IMF. That was just a one-time thing that we did. Okay, thanks.
Yeah, yeah.
On the next slide, we requested 5 projects here for fiscal 24 for the board's approval. And it's a continuation of the Sycamore Filter Gallery that Steve was talking about. So doing additional filters with this $3 million. We had the 1.5 million for the CDM Water Quality Master Plan and Strategic Project. We have $6 million for a new project, which is the replacement of the new river intake fender system. That this has been on the project list for several years since it was damaged by a boat back in 2016 and then hit again. So what's happened here is there was structural damage done to fender system that protects the intake, very critical thing as we learned, during saltwater is that intake, and to get the protection that's needed, this $6 million will go to rebuild that, and we believe that this will be a very beneficial project.
Want another 4 million for the pavement.
Yes,
Continue that trend that was shown.
continuation on the paving, and then the 200,000 is related to the continuation of stormwater fee analysis that Raptellus working with us on.
Okay, so this would, I didn't add that. Just want to make sure I understand. It's 10. About $16 million you're asking for here in the fund. I just want to understand total revenues to date. That's through today from the beginning is 53 million. We're expecting about 20 some odd million. Total expenses is 17. We bidded for 40 million more than the 17. The projects that we're committed to, but the bill hadn't come in yet. So now we're asking for another 17. Is that a fair step?
Yeah, but that's right, because there's a beginning balance that we have accumulated that we add to the new revenues and then we deduct the expenses. So by adding these projects, which is 14.7 million this year, projecting those expenses, looking at the future revenues, we're still at a healthy fund balance.
Right.
In 2025.
And when we look at this, the 4 million will be near-term spend, the stormwater analysis, near-term spend, the 6 million would take longer to spend to replace the fender, I would assume. Water quality master plan, that's ongoing, that's a spend right now, and the water treatment plant improvements, is that immediate future, or would that money actually be spent?
The water quality master plan.
I know the water treatment improvement Sycamore, the extra 3 million you're asking.
It would be ongoing. We would spend that money in 24.
Yeah.
24.
Yeah, to continue what we've started in 23, what picture we showed you.
Okay, are there any questions regarding this request?
Yeah, I have a question about, and as a comment about the pavement restoration process. These contracts are we've been out doing the curbside ride through and that sort of thing. I would ask that we be intentional about, these are opportunities for smaller businesses to be in part to do this work. It's less complicated than some of the major engineering work. So I would ask that we think about how do we be inclusive in the procurement process when it comes to these, and maybe it's the bundling, maybe it's going with companies that are DBEs or companies that can do this particular work and on-ramp them into the work.
Yeah, and we will be rebidding that paving contract because we've spent faster. That'll be going out again here early this next year, and we will have the appropriate DBE goals associated with that advertisement.
All right.
It'd be actually good for us to hear, I think, how that went.
Yeah,
you
Will
know,
do.
on the previous contract as well for some of those subs. If that's good. That's a positive aspect of the program. I think.
Any other questions?
Yeah, Bill here. I have a question. Um, on the stormwater fee, another $200,000, that will be a total of 450,000 that we've allocated to that. What are we going to get for this additional $200,000? Where are we going to actually be at a point where we know exactly how this plan is supposed to roll out and or at least have opportunities to make decisions on that?
That's a good question, but it's a very good question. I'm sure Ghassan going to answer that, but I'd like to point out that the board pushed Ghassan to that study further down the road. So could you answer his?
Well, I mean, we were in agreement for continuing. So I'll answer your question, but what's happening now is we have delivered a feasibility study for how to fund a drainage system in the city. And there were a lot of assumptions and alternatives put together because it's a study, it's not a policy making process. It's meant to enable policymakers to make good well-informed decisions. So what this 200,000 would allow us to do is respond to the conversation we're going to start having with the policymakers who have showed more appetite into, moving forward to take on this new initiative. And we're going to have a lot of technical questions, a lot of some maybe legal questions, quantifying this, quantify that. So we want to be able to be in a position to respond to those policymakers and the public, people like you who ask questions. What about this? What about that? And you have to be nimble, and we can anticipate some, but there will be questions that we're gonna be asked that we're gonna need to do some more evaluation and analysis.
Bill, does that answer your question or you need?
Yeah, just one last question or additional question. Is our current vendor the right person to do this next leg of the work?
Yes, certainly. We
Okay.
select them initially, and they have been very responsive, and they've done probably 80% of the stormwater plans across the country. So yes,
Okay, thank you very much.
thank you.
Any other questions?
I do. I don't have any concerns or comments about questions about this, but on a big picture, since we're talking about probably a motion to approve money. I remember, and I see it in the minutes, that we had a conversation about an additional 10 million for the power complex connection for the static frequency changer number 2 that we heard to this meeting. Is that a conversation we still need to have?
Yeah, we had a little more information about that, and Caitlin was gonna help me. So maybe if we go to the next slide, it will work up to it. So the intake, we should have, do we have one after
One
this?
more one. Yeah.
Yeah, so this was a detail of the initial 20 million that we've talked about and now has been allocated contract. So Caitlin, you want to share that this 20 and then the potential additional 10 that we have listed, not as a request today, but potential later in fiscal 24.
Yeah, so there's presently 2 line items that you do see on the project list. And so the first one was the T7 solution. That was $4 million. That has gone towards the design of Turbine 7. That was one of the first projects that we started working on when we got the funding from HUD to actually purchase the turbine. So there is design associated with that. There are additional costs associated with storing that turbine. It's available now, but we don't have a place to put it at the moment, which is a good problem to have, but we do have to pay for some storage, and it needs to be in an appropriate facility. It needs to be conditioned and all the things. The second line is the integration and auxiliary components. That is a total of 20 million. And the breakdown of that, that funding is here. That's going towards equipment purchase contracts for the transformers, auxiliary package, electrical equipment, as well as another generator, we call it a black start generator that we would need that will be bid next year. There's another contract already ongoing for some additional work in the boiler house at the moment. It's also, we've applied funds to the continuing design of this project and the program here as well. Another future project that we're planning to put out on the street in early 2024 is an RFP for a grid control system. We haven't talked too much about the, excuse us, our doors are figuring themselves out. One of the key elements is the appropriate software and technology to overlay on the equipment so that we can continue to transition from that manual process to the most efficient automatic process. And additionally, developing SOPs and other administrative items around that for it to be appropriate. And the final part of that 20 million is a contingency for change orders. That is the reality. I'll share that we've, at this point, are about 3% of our total overall projects in construction. Right now, we do have $151 million of contracts that are SWEPNO managed on the street or awarded or in progress. And so it's about $4.5 million. So we're,
Change orders? That's outstanding.
yeah, it's, yes.
Wow.
So the team's done an excellent
what-
job of managing that.
An expert on that.
Um,
Sounds pretty good.
Paul never had a change order.
So we're not done. We still have a long ways to go, but just, I think, the
Good
team's done a
trajectory,
really
yeah.
great job on that. And just so to add the additional 10 that was discussed. So I think this lays out where we're at. I wanted to share that, it's kind of before I go into the additional 10. We have 8 different funding sources on this program. So it is a lot to manage, and this has really filled a critical gap for us. With that additional 10, which would bring us to 34 million, that's 13% of the entire funding. And that has allowed us to be able to move forward with these projects more immediately while waiting for approvals for some federal sources to come in. So the additional 10 would be applied to the commissioning contract that I mentioned that is on the street now. We are planning to start that ideally Q2 of 2024, and that will then go through summer of 2025. So from just a sequencing cash flow perspective, that's not needed, most immediately, but it will be in order to complete the program.
So you really, if to Neil's point, you're saying you would, I know we indicated that we would be willing to do it subject to additional information, but so you're really not going to bring that 10 million to us until next quarter, is that right?
Yes, yeah, we can update you further Q1 or early Q2, but that's our plan right now.
Right, any other questions on this slide? If there's no other questions, we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 items on this slide that I should our approval on funding of that. If not, then it can do that. So moved by seconded by John. Any discussion? All in favor?
Just if I could, Paul, we have this cash on hand or, pretty reliable cash flow. I think the sooner we can deploy it and get it into the hands of these important projects, the better. So I'm absolutely in favor of it. You can go ahead and call for the vote.
Jesse, in the minutes in the motion, what you take what's in this slide and put that, thank you, Bill. And I agree. I think everybody would agree with. Anything else?
Concludes our presentation. Thank you so much.
So that takes us through item 6 on the agenda. Do we have any public comment? A public comment. Okay. We have a list of potential dates for our infrastructure advisory board meetings for next year. Q1, March 14th, Q2, June 13th, Q3, September 12th, and 4 December 12th. I'd like a motion to approve those dates unless you want.
Second.
Neil, motion was made by Mr. Abramson and seconded by Ms. Raymond. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? None. Okay, so that's, is there any other business that we need to bring? Okay, well, with that, I know we're all looking forward to the tour uh, of the West Power Plant. And so I entertain a motion to adjourn.
Our motion that we adjourn.
By Mr. Morris,
Second.
second by Ms. Raymond, all in favor.
You guys have fun.
Thank you.
All right, look, Bill, we expect you to have the budget solved by
Better
the
sit
time
down
you
there.
get back to New Orleans.
To the left.
See you guys.
What time?